Hi, everyone. We're going to wait 1 minute until everyone joins. They're still coming in. I think the quietest this group has ever been.
Calm before the storm.
Exactly. All right, we'll wait another 20 seconds and then we'll get started.
Sounds good.
All right, we can get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Dummer, and I am the Chief Growth Officer at GTN Global Tax Network. We're a full-service mobility tax provider. It's an honor to be here today. We've been through a lot this last year, but we have a great panel presentation in store with some amazing people on the screen with me. First, I'd like to go through some logistics. So attendees will be unmuted. The panel discussion, what's happening here? The audience will be able to ask questions. So please use the chat feature or the question feature. And to ask a question, just press the chat question or the chat feature here, and we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can during the presentation. We want to keep this an open dialogue. We'd like to thank our friends at RUAF for the CRP and GMS credits. They're shown here on the screen, but we will actually share them after when we send a recording to everyone here who is attended and registered. And our friends at Quicken Loans have provided the SHRM and HCRI credits. So thank you for both of you for providing these. We're very grateful. So 1 year ago today, I repeat, 1 year ago today, May 20th, 2020, this panel was here discussing the ramifications of the pandemic. And I won't go into the details, but wow, a lot of the things we said, we just had no idea. We had no idea what the impact the pandemic would have on everybody personally and professionally, and more importantly to this industry. So I guess the goal here today is really to discuss the RMC perspective on what the pandemic meant for the relocation industry. And I have some questions: will this be forever? Is the changes good? Is it needed? I think RMCs provide a very unique perspective because they are kind of at the center of all things relocation oriented for our clients, for our prospects, for the whole industry in general. So we're really looking forward to this. We have over 900 people that have registered for this event today. I personally think this is it will be one of the last big virtual events. I'm really looking forward to seeing people in person, and just seeing Brian, Joe, Eric, and Betsy makes me want to have a beer with them after. So let's cheers to that at some point. So I'm looking forward to that. So now to the introductions. I will quickly say who's in attendance, and then we'll start off with a brief 15-20 second introduction. So we have Eric Tate from AIRS. We've got Brian Potts from Altair, Betsy Welch from Cornerstone, and Joe Jackson. So we'll start with you, Betsy. If you can just give a quick introduction.
Sure. I presently serve as the Senior Vice President of Strategic Engagement for Cornerstone Relocation Group. I've been in the mobility field for over 20 years, we'll just leave it at that, and have worked both in the corporate HR mobility side as well as with several RMCs, and delighted to be here today.
Thank you. Brian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Brian Potts with Altair Global, EVP of our Americas. Been with Altair 24 years and in the industry about 28. And responsible for all our client service delivery and retention across Altair.
Joe, you're up.
Great, thanks, Greg. Joe Jackson, Senior Vice President of Business Development for the Americas for Graebel. This is my 21st year in the industry. Funny enough, I started as an intern from an associate. I've held myriads of roles within mobility, and not sure if that was something that was on purpose or divine intervention. So I'm very, very glad to be here, and glad to be talking with these people from a year past. Incredible it's been that long.
Thanks, Joe. Eric?
Hi, everybody. My name's Eric Tate. I'm as Greg mentioned, the Vice President of the East for AIRS. I've been in mobility and with AIRS for 27 years, all of them obviously with AIRS. Joe, I started as a sales trainee in our corporate office in Pittsburgh, spent some time in Houston, a little bit in California, and been in Connecticut for the last 22 years.
Well, thank you, everyone. This is a very impressive group. There's other RMCs out here, and I know a lot of them are in attendance. So please bring up, if you disagree or you'd like to add to anything, please put the chat or question feature. We'll try to address this. So I have some questions that I've written, and I'd love to start off with Betsy for the first question. Betsy from Cornerstone. So reflecting on the past 15 months, how did your organization fare? And is there anything you wish you would have done differently?
Sure. So I think for Cornerstone in early 2020, as soon as we sort of figured out what was happening and the uncertainty of it all as the pandemic was starting, we took a hard look at and planned for volume reductions. We then took all the right measures and actions and ended with a profitable year. We stayed very focused on our clients, and we developed a timely and relevant communications plan that wouldn't bombard them with information. I think every single one of us had information coming from so many sources. We wanted to, and not bombard them, but also give them what they needed. Definitely, our business mix changed, and we had planned for some of it. Interestingly, our home sale values increased significantly as people sold, and we also saw an uptake in home purchase activity, and those are both obviously within the US. And the home purchase was in large part because employees made personal changes during the pandemic. And looking back at 2020, there are no actions. As a leadership team, we've looked at it, and I don't think there's anything we would have done in a different way.
Thanks, Betsy. Anyone else would like to add to that?
Joe, you were about to say. I'll jump in, and then Joe, I'll let you go second next time. So I would echo a lot of Betsy's thoughts. I mean, you know, we planned very early. Just to start it off, we actually had a pretty good year last year. A much better year than we started to worry about, you know, in kind of those April, May, June months when there was a little bit of holdback on bookings. But you know, we finished the year. This is our 40th anniversary. This is the first year we didn't grow, was 2020, but we were only down about 8% off of 2019, and that was really a record year for us. So I think, you know, the lesson is that mobility doesn't stop, and it was always an essential service. So you know, we move forward, and actually, again, we had a pretty good year. The one thing I think we would do differently is we focused very heavily early on, as I'm sure everybody did, on making sure everybody could work from home successfully, on everybody's physical well-being and the physical well-being of the families we were relocating. Had we known that it was going to last as long as it has, I think we're doing a lot of initiatives around mental health now for our employees. And I think we probably would have started that earlier in the year had we known how long it would go on. So we've done a lot of internal webinars and a lot of health joy type apps, and, you know, just really focusing on not just our employees' physical, but mental health. And I think if we had it over again, we would have started that from the start as opposed to kind of, you know, a few months into it.
And very similar here too, from a Graebel perspective. You know, 2020 was a year for the books. You know, there was so much uncertainty in March and beyond. But from a business perspective, we had a great year. We had some amazing new sales wins. But, you know, I think what was more impressive for me is I had mentioned last year that we went from 17 locations to about 900 global offices because everybody was working from home. So there was always that thought that, oh my goodness, what processes have to change? You know, where do we have to adapt? And, you know, organizationally, I couldn't be more proud of everything that not only the management team that put in place, but even down to everybody that is working directly with our customers or sending invoices. Everybody pulled together. And our service, our customer stat scores increased. during the pandemic. So, what's funny is when I look back and say, what would we have done different? Terrible fortune teller. I got to tell you, I went back and reforecasted everything. I had my doomsday plan. I said, you know what, let's be prepared. But in actuality, and that's what I love about this industry, we all kind of pulled together, right? Not only from the RMC world, but our clients. We've acted in ways that we never have as an RMC, and our great partners out there have done so much to ensure that that level of care was elevated throughout. So I think that's something is, never jump to conclusions. Kind of wait, sit back, and allow the magic of your organization to take place and truly drive those fundamental values forward.
Brian, would you care to add anything?
Well, it certainly covered it pretty well. I will say that to continue that theme though, we're going to remain humble, because to Joe's point, wish we'd have done differently what we thought we knew in May of last year or June. Take that same approach, Greg. You said this might be the last virtual, big meeting. I'm sitting there going, maybe not. What if we have some future uncertainty? So what I want to do is continue to take those lessons from 2020 and even early 2021 and continue to apply them here now. So I think what Altair did very well is the contingency planning exercises in 2020 and now into 2021. And still in, let's say, H2 of 2021, what are some contingency plans that we need to have in place off the shelf if X, Y, or Z happen? And that's what we're continuing to focus on right now.
Thanks, Brian. Well, so now to the next question. I think it's a kind of a segue. We talked a lot about internally your organizations, but how about our clients? How have our clients really adapted to this, and what are you seeing from them? I think, for me personally, a lot of them were sheltered. I mean, 2020 kind of looks like a year, like it's what's said in Vegas stays in Vegas. It just was a year that it was just off the books for everybody, and they had to deal with people sheltering in place, people moving closer to home, people just scattered throughout the country. And I think now they're just starting to come to grips with what that is. But Brian, I'll start with you. How have your clients adapted, and what are you seeing from them?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it kind of varied so much between our corporate clients, really depending on their culture and certainly the industry they were in. Having a diversified portfolio of clients that Altair has, and all of my fellow lecturers here on the board, we saw from our tech clients they were resilient. They were certainly more prepared to work from home and adapt to that environment, and then continue to actually have volume and that flexibility of not having to have the employee actually physically relocate to the destination, but just hire them and they can start in their departure and their home location. Now that was a little bit more challenging for some of our retail, some of our automotive clients, and in traditional spaces, that was a little harder to do. So that volume mix, we certainly had to adapt to each client, and also, what were our contingency plans for 2020 to support them, and what are theirs. Now they're coming out of this, and I know Eric and Joe and Betsy will all hit on this, so I won't steal that. But there's hybrid. What does this look like going forward? And we're hearing all of these different plans of some type of return to office, but a hybrid schedule. What job types may we move permanently to a don't have to come to the office ever status? That's going to cut down on commercial real estate. It's going to cut down on maybe traditional mobility volume, but in a future space, there's going to be some different support that we can provide to those employees. And so that's what I'm seeing. Just I'll say at a pulse point, and know that Joe and Eric and Betsy will have some additional comments.
What I was to see, Greg, what I was most excited to see from a client perspective too is I feel the role of global mobility was elevated last year organizationally. There were a lot of new stakeholders coming out and saying, where's the mobility team? We need help. Where are our people? And that really bridged a great symbiosis with the RMC and the client, because we had to work hand in hand. So they had to be able to adapt to new stakeholders and then adapt to new strategies. Move mixes were changing. It was also very much triage for a time, but then you had to come out of triage and plan going forward. So I really feel that coming out of this, our clients are going to be able to have that more frequent role in planning, especially as pertains to contingency planning or, ensuring that the business knows that mobility is a lever for growth, and it's absolutely needed. I mean, it's days of a pandemic and forward. So seeing our clients adapt there and developing new strategies quickly, looking at what metrics are now important to them and important to the business, that evolution, I believe, is going to come out of the pandemic and just continue for many years to come.
Eric or Betsy?
Sure. So I can echo, I think we've all had some similar experiences, certainly based on what Brian and Joe have shared. With the varying client mix, some clients have continued on, others continue to struggle, particularly, for example, retailers that are heavily dependent on brick and mortar and haven't converted to enough online business. And others that thrived, pharmaceutical, food and beverage. I mean, those businesses continued. And I think for our clients, we have actually seen increased volume in 2021 versus 2020, certainly higher in US domestic. We haven't seen anything return to 2019 levels yet, but if we compare our May 2021 activity, it is 201% higher than May 2020 and 85% compared to May 2019. And we do see, again, like has been mentioned, many of our clients will have some return to office, but the whole idea of hybrid and flex workforce is very much part of what many of our clients will do going forward, except for those occasions where they have to have somebody physically in an office to do research or manufacturing or those sorts of things. So Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. And I would, obviously concur with everything everybody said. The only thing I would add is just that I think it has brought us so much closer to our clients. I think, none of us probably like being referred to as a vendor. We're all partners. And I think truly over the course of the last 15 months, that partnership has been more important than ever. As Joe mentioned, it has become more of a focal point, mobility being at the forefront of organizations. And I think we've seen not a ton of policy changes, but a lot of exception management that we work together on to, maybe you don't want to change your whole policy, but you do want to deal with people in their situation to make sure that they're getting the duty of care that they deserve. So I just think overall, we all adapt, right? The industry has adapted over and over and over, and you keep having to add more services and to be an expert in more areas. And in this case, just making sure that we kept our clients compliant and the families relocating safely and providing the best service possible. But in conjunction with our clients, I just think the relationships became more important than ever in the last 15 months.
Yeah.
That's a great segue, Eric, because my next question is really, how has the RMC business model changed? And as a result of the pandemic, is it long-term? Is it short-term? Is it, who knows? So Eric, you kind of started off on that, but maybe you can continue on how the model has changed for Eric.
Sure. My least favorite term that's come out of 2020 is the new normal, so I'm not going to use it. However, I do think, I don't know that our business model has fundamentally changed, but certainly, how we perform the services has certainly changed. So, I think for the most part, probably at some point, all of our employees from all of the companies here were working from home. That's a big adjustment. From a technology standpoint, getting everybody up and running, our employees, they have kids who are going to school remotely, and, it just making that work internally, is a challenge that, as Joe mentioned, their scores were higher. Our scores were also higher last year than ever before, which kind of proves that, this hybrid long-term approach is going to be successful. It was kind of a forced way to have us all do it. But, when you get into things like, temporary housing in the past, I could move out of it on Friday and Joe, you get a cleaning crew in there and Joe moves into it on Saturday. You're not doing that anymore. You need time in between to have it deep cleaned and thoroughly cleaned and turned over, and days in between people moving in, and movers in, the heat of the summer wearing gloves and masks, and, more breaks, every area of mobility was affected over the last year. So I do think for sure mobility has changed, but the demise of the mobility industry has been predicted many times, all the way back to like video conferencing was going to end the need to relocate people. But at the end of the day, I think mobility has always been kind of a recession-proof business, and mobility will always be necessary. So I don't think business models have changed necessarily, but I think we've all adapted to the needs of the families we're relocating into our corporate clients.
Anyone else? Joe, Brian, or Betsy?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Eric's thoughts, and to further that, I think the pandemic has reinforced the need of the RMC. I mean, we were shoulder to shoulder with our clients, and even the role of the RMC, I saw much of a evolution last year. Helping to determine, from an exception perspective, how do we bifurcate the pandemic exceptions from the other exceptions? So when you're reporting things out, there were new services that were created because of the pandemic that never would have been created before. So working with our third party to quickly put things in, like relief services. There were many expatriates either in quarantine, so they were worried. They're in a different country, so we had to figure out ways to get toiletries. I mean, we went from finding housing and finding getting a driver's license to getting the basic necessities within temporary living. So I really think it showed the adaptability of the RMC and the ability to truly elevate the nature of the services and truly help to align and collaborate with our clients.
I will just add to that. I've heard both Eric and Joe, and I'm sure Brian's going to say the same thing as well. There's probably not a single answer for all RMCs, but flexibility, adaptability, proactivity. If you didn't have a service delivery structure that enabled you to bring those things forward and make them how you do your business every day, I think, some RMCs may have struggled a bit with that. We had situations in which you're accommodating rebooking of travel 3, 4, 5 times. You are changing destination locations on a dime. And visa and immigration changing midstream, perhaps to other countries. And so that level of adaptability and flexibility within the service delivery model of the RMC, super, super, super important. And I think in general, duty of care, as Eric mentioned, empathy for our staff, our clients and their employees, and flexibility and adaptability can continue to be of heightened importance. And that is what will drive success for the RMCs that are able to do that. Brian,
you would add something?
Yeah, I'll just round that out and from my perspective, because the service delivery has changed. We were on our customer experience and client experience journey as an organization ahead of the pandemic. And you see now, and I think Joe hit it about, we're not just coordinating logistics and administering services. We are now being consultative to the people and the clients that we're moving, but we're also being psychologically sympathetic to these folks because we are all in this pandemic. That has put a different lens, let's say, on the consultant job, right? On that is administering these services and so investing in our team members in that experience management journey and hiring, training, developing that talent and that approach to the business couldn't be more important today and going forward in terms of how we support our clients strategically. And that's going to last for some time. As we talked about, we're excited that we're coming out of this, but we're not all coming out of it. We see challenges in India. We know that this is still an issue and we've got to be careful and methodical. And that's still going to be very palpable for the people that are moving. And it's incumbent, I think, on all of the RMCs and the people that are administering those services to have that mindset. And so that has how I think it has fundamentally changed is the humans that we're moving. We've all just gone through something pretty extraordinary, and you have to acknowledge that, and it has to be in the room, and we can't go back to 2019 and before.
Thanks, Brian. So we have some really good questions that have come in. from Elena Moscow and also Chris Pardo. I'd like to start off with one from Elena. It actually is directed to Eric, and then I can expand it, but it actually expands on what you were just talking about, Brian. The question is, when you reflected on what you would have done differently in 2020, you focus on your employees' well-being. With RMCs being so central to employee relocation and settling in experiences, do you also expect a renewed focus on the well-being of employees that you relocate, and what do you see changing there?
Yeah, for sure. So, we're going to talk a little bit here about duty of care. And I think that really lends to an increased focus upfront with expectations of the family. And so not just the relocating employee, but certainly now the entire family is part of that discussion. And that upfront expectation, and it's really more when you get into duty of care, it's more about their physical well-being and their mental well-being. So we have adjusted our upfront conversations, those kind of initial consultations with the families to include the entire family situation and include all of those aspects of, because they may have kids home or parents in their home that they normally maybe wouldn't have that have an underlying health issue, or have some, or they've been in isolation. They haven't left the house in 2 years or, 15 months. And that can lend, so we're definitely upfront on that duty of care, putting the mental health of the families we're relocating along with that physical piece at the forefront of every relocation we're doing now.
Anyone else like to add to that? Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I'll just say that we, during the pandemic, we used our Qualtrics platform. We pulsed our transferring employees and provided that back to our clients and gave them an opportunity to say what was on their minds. And then sharing that back with our clients, I think there was a lot of different learns from our corporate clients, just where that sentiment was. And then turning that on within our clients' organizations and tying them onto their health benefit intranet. What could they do to support them from a client base with their employees, kind of seeing this feedback and how their concerns were impacting their job, their performance, their family. And then now we're in a secondary stage of, okay, so how do we work from an RMC corporate client partnership to kind of take that into 2021?
Thanks. So we have another good question from Chris Pardo that came in, and he said, and this is something we're starting to see a lot of GTN is, can anyone talk about virtual assignments and how they were deployed during the pandemic and thoughts about their usage going forward?
I'll talk to that, Greg, because we've seen a number of clients that have tried that virtual assignments. And I think that was more to, in some instances, kind of fill a void, right? Because you could not physically get into the country that you were intended to go to. So virtual assignments came up and you had to act quick. There was, again, adaptability. We had to ensure that there were flexible pieces in there. There's tax consequences many of times, as I'm sure you know, Greg, and we had to take a look at that and counsel our clients accordingly to pros and cons. Is there a better way to do the virtual assignment? Is it from a different location? Is it near site versus totally virtual? So I think it took a lot of time to really scope it out, but you also had to do it quick. So you couldn't take too much time to have it in place because the business need was still there. Irregardless of the pandemic, there was still business need. Corporations were still looking to put talent in different locations, whether it's a developmental role or it was a true business need. So we saw those happening more in certain industries than others. I mean, there's some industries where you have to be there. Pharmaceutical, if you're working, in the manufacturing facility, you need to be there. Do I see virtual assignments sticking around? If you asked me this 6 to 8 months ago, I would have said,
by the way, Jeff.
I would say 6 to 8 months ago, absolutely, they would likely be sticking around. But I believe that, and we've done surveys around this, employees want to go on assignment. They want to actually go on assignment, be with their colleagues in the new country, get that hands-on experience, that globalization. So we'll see them, but I don't believe they will replace the traditional expat assignment.
Yep, agreed.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, thanks for the question. Keep them coming in, everyone, because this is a very good subject matter. So Joe, you'll start off with this one, please. what was your biggest success story from the pandemic, or what are you most proud of? It can be both professionally and personally, I suppose.
Oh, well, all right. So we'll stick with professionally. I think, the big piece was, the resiliency of Graebel and the ability to, going back again, the whole fortune teller piece, with your entire workforce working from home, there's a ton of unknowns, especially from the consultancy ranks and what that's going to be able to do from a service perspective. How does that change? The adaptation of Zoom or Microsoft Teams absolutely helped to give that somewhat of a one-to-one, face-to-face experience. But again, I just think the biggest success was the ability to truly ebb and flow and change the empathy a little bit. So Betsy, you had mentioned empathy is so critical to the experience for not just the mobile employees, but for our clients, for our great partners out there. But typically, if you think about an assignment, the two biggest things that families are worried about are usually, where am I going to live? And if I have children, where are they going to go to school? We have seen a bit of a shift this year, and that has changed to, what are the safety precautions that are going to be there for me and the family? So being able to identify that early and to give that confidence to our clients, to the mobile employee, to our partners, we were able to do that very quickly. And that has allowed us to be able to be more consultative in different areas. So that was a huge, huge win for that. And, I think from a personal perspective, and I know we'll talk a little bit about, some successes about, from the COVID, but I think from personal perspective is spending more time with the family. We typically, I'm sure everyone on this panel travel quite a bit. So being able to be home with your kids and your family and eating dinner, that truly has been a huge success and something that, we look to continue some of those new traditions that were born during the pandemic and carry them on. So I think that was also a nice success.
Anyone else? Eric, were you going to say something?
I guess just to add on to that, for heirs, there's a lot of things to celebrate from 2020 and a lot of successes. I think the thing I'm most proud of from a business standpoint is that, everybody went remote. Our post-relocation scores were the highest we've ever had, and we retained 100% of our staff. We did not have any layoffs, and with that, we actually hired last year. The last time we kind of faced something like this was around 9/11, when international really shut down for a period of time, and we really looked at that as an opportunity to, okay, this isn't a permanent thing, it's going to end at some point, and when it does, we want to be best positioned coming out of it. So really, I'm super proud of keeping all of our staff and actually adding to it to prepare, going forward in the future for our continued growth and mobility.
Betsy or Brian, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think that, Eric hit it, employee retention, team member retention from an Altair perspective, it's critical. In times of peril, you look to your larger entities, whether or not it's your family structure, your company structure, your country structure. So our duty of care was to our employees and providing the environment, the commitment level to them as individuals, as people, to be safe, to work from home, to not lay anybody off. That's where employees value a lot about a company, and it's not just about a paycheck, it's about all those other intangibles. Taking that approach and then applying that to our client base. We had no clients lost in 2020, and that's a critical thing for us because that meant we showed up every day. We were providing value. We were a strong partner, and so those are some incredibly proud accomplishments for us from an Altair perspective. Personally, I was super proud of the weight gain for me, the COVID weight gain that happened. That was a good
So I'll just add a couple of thoughts. I think, like the gentlemen have already mentioned, for Cornerstone, our individual customer surveys, as well as our client surveys, increased in 2020 in number, and sorry, in rating. And so the highest surveys we've ever had in the history of the company, actually. And we also had 100% client retention. And I think the last thing company-wise would be the fact that we ended highly profitable at year's end. And so we planned not to, and we're delighted that we did. So you plan for the worst, you hope for the best, and you strive for the best. And that was our experience. And I think personally for me, I think what I learned or gained during the pandemic is a renewed sense of what is really important. What is really important and what is not. Not that we don't know those things already, but I think it kind of forced us to sit back as individuals, both professionally and personally, and figure out what the priorities really are. Second, I had tons of time for creative outlets, which is super important to me. So I was thankful for the time for that. And I think it was Eric, you mentioned you don't like the term new normal, and I'm right there with you. But my personal hope and ambition is that I can keep that focus on what really is important, what are the right priorities, and making time for personal pleasures and creative outlets as we move into whatever our normals are going forward.
Thanks, Betsy. That's true, and I agree. Life did slow down quite a bit, and I think it did have everybody reflect on what's important and what truly matters. And the reality is that there's not much that matters outside of family and health and some of the basic core things that make life worth it. And a lot of them are just things that we can, as a first world economy, be able to do. So thank you for sharing that. So the next question is really I'm opening it up, but I hope everyone can opine on this, is really forward thinking. So there's this, everywhere I'm talking to, first of all, we're getting active. People are starting to call, coming out of the woodworks. A lot of people that were put on hold for a year, they're engaging with us, and that's fantastic. So there's this predicted surge that's coming about. And, there's Bay Area companies that have 25,000 moves that are, pending. Now, everyone's handicapping how many will actually happen. So I would love for you to just comment on, number one, are you seeing a surge, both domestic and international? And the most important question, are your suppliers ready for it? Because, especially with summer coming, but then also, a lot of them were hit with the pandemic. So would anyone like to start off with that? Or if not, I can choose.
I could start.
Do I go first this time, Eric? Or
Joe, I defer to the gentleman in the blue jacket.
Thank you. Yes, unequivocally.
All right, thanks, Joe. Now I'm ready now.
Peak 2.0 is coming. I absolutely think there is, there's the notion of revenge travel that's going to be happening. Bill Graebel has said it. There's going to be revenge relocation. I strongly believe in looking at the numbers that are coming in from our current client base, what we're hearing from an industry, from the surveys that we have done, we're absolutely going to see quite a bit. Not only from a U.S. domestic perspective, I think that's likely where you're going to see it first. We seem to be opening a bit quicker than other countries, but as other countries start to, you'll see more assignments, and we're going to see quite a bit of cross-border as well. Cross-border in Europe, cross-border in Asia-Pac. So that's going to be something to look at likely for Q3, Q4, but it's going to start. We're already seeing it starting. And our partners have done an amazing job, not only now ramping up for that volume, but all through. I mean, they've been so decisive in their process. They've ebbed and flowed as well. So I'm confident that the partners that we utilize, and I'm sure Betsy, Brian, and Eric use similar partners. They're ready. I mean, they've been ramping up and are at a point where it's going to be very welcomed as well. So it's something that I believe as RMCs we're going to have to watch for sure, to ensure that our clients' interests are there, making sure that we can fulfill all of the requests and all the needs. But with the partnership with the supply chain and having those open communication, open dialogue, that's going to help kind of be with that peak 2.0 and ensuring that we have the proper bandwidth everywhere.
So, Eric, you're up.
I totally agree. So, I mean, our numbers through today are actually, they are higher than they were at this point in 2019. So I think there was, 2020 was, we were expecting dramatic growth, and then that obviously quelled, but I do think there was, a lot of on hold. We actually had less cancellations in 2020 of relocations than we've had in historical years, but way more relocations that were delayed. So there's a definite surge, and I expect 2021 to be huge for, I'm assuming for everybody. It's going to be busy. As Joe mentioned, we do, we all have our partners that we work with, and many of them are shared across, different relocation management companies. So they are prepared. I think, every year you hear that there's going to be a surge in moving, and there's these blackout dates that everybody wants to close their home on June 30th, July 31st, and August 31st. So those days it might be tougher to get a mover, but the industry always adapts. Again, there's small shipment programs that now that can give a better service for lower cost and let the van lines focus on the bread and butter moves. I think there's no matter what service you're talking about, the demand will determine the supply, and we'll always make it work. So at the end of the day, we all want to make the best experience possible for the families we're relocating, and our partners are ready to be our partner in that.
Yeah, I think it's valid points, Eric, about the communication levels back between the corporate client, the RMC, and to the supply chain, which have always existed, but in this return to office situation in 2021, it's a bit unique, just because of how long we've been, locked down, so to speak. So, Greg, I mean, there's going to be mini surges, right, from our corporate clients, because what are their timelines to getting back? Because that's what's going to open the floodgates. And so what we're seeing is different appetites for that with our client base. And I think the best thing that we can do as an RMC is have those active conversations. What does this look like for your organization, so that we can help prepare our supply chain? Because they do have to ramp back up, whether it's housing, whether it's household goods, whether it's destination services, in the US or outside, as we mentioned, that it might have a stagger step effect. But I think the communication, so that we can go back to that supply chain and say, this is what we're looking at, for Q3 or Q4 or even into 2021. How does this look like for you? And what do you need to do then to go incrementally increase, whether it's housing or the small shipments that Eric mentioned? I think that's an absolute huge thing to the moving industry, to help bifurcate the large moves to van lines and the small shipments to more of a lift van structure.
Yeah, and I would echo what others have already said. We've certainly seen an increase in US domestic. International is lagging a little bit, as Joe had mentioned, for the obvious reasons. Borders haven't necessarily opened, nor immigration. And so we do expect international to increase as the world gets back to more open borders. I think two particular, and our relationship, as everyone has said, with our supply chain partners is very, very critical. And how we communicate with them, how we share volume expectations, and those sorts of things, that has to be done with great frequency. We have heard from some of our supplier partners that there are challenges for household goods internationally and domestically. There's been a surge in COD or personal moves that has continued throughout the pandemic in the US. There's been obviously an increase in military moves, and now there's an increase in corporate moves. And some of the US movers are having difficulty obtaining labor. There may be a longer response time for surveys. Issues handling very short timeframes, which always happens in the summer, but is exacerbated a little bit by these other things. Shortages of trucks, and internationally, port delays and shortages of containers, because they haven't moved all around to all the right places yet, as they normally would. And I think that on our temporary lodging providers, that certainly the ones that Cornerstone uses, we've not seen as many challenges, but it is a known issue that there are providers in temporary lodging who, during the pandemic, let go of some of their inventory didn't pay landlords, and so the landlords won't rent to them anymore. And some of those firms are having difficulty handling the placements, but those temporary lodging providers who did the right thing all along are not having challenges. And just as everyone else has mentioned, our role at the RMC is to proactively communicate and manage and reset expectations with both our clients as well as individual employees on timeframes.
Well, thank you. So there are some really good questions coming in, and I think Betsy and all of you just addressed a few of them. So we'll try to tackle a few more directly. So Marilee Bratt had a question, and it's kind of it's a long one, but it covers a couple key items. Number one, do you see RMCs investing more in API technology capabilities to meet the flow of data to and from client systems to help with data analytics and requirements? And also, so that's the first question. And also, it will help with maybe a different type of reporting that will show leaders the real stories around its talent pools, and now with an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion within their assignments and for building talent programs and policies. So kind of two questions. So I think the first one is really integration. I mean, I think, from my perspective, I'm thinking more and more clients, they want, whether it actually comes to fruition in the end when the rubber hits the road, but they really want to have a single source. They want to have more, data flow between all of their key partners and to be able to show visibility. So maybe we can tackle that one first. Would anyone like to comment on that, and how are you dealing with this?
I can go if Joe allows me.
Guys are so competitive.
We only live about 20 miles apart, so. But yeah, I mean, I think those are great questions. The API piece for sure is a big focus for us. Really, companies are looking at 4 areas, of mobility as a whole. Their relocation management company they're partnering with, immigration, tax, and then their own internal HRIS system. And so we're putting a lot of focus, and we are integrating with clients now into their HRIS systems. We have integrations built with some of our tax providers and are looking to expand that. We have integrations built with some of our immigration providers. So we can, at the end of the day, what we want to give our clients is a single pane of glass that they can see all information in one place, as opposed to going into a bunch of different systems or authorizing a bunch of different systems. And I don't want to take this information that's already here in my HRIS system and rekey it into your forms. So building those integrations has been a big focus. I know not just for heirs, but something that we've invested greatly in, because again, we adapt to our clients' needs, and anything we can do to make their lives easier is better for us. So that's something that we're heavily invested in, is having those, and as we bring in new clients and even with existing clients, continuing to build those integrations.
I agree. I think Altair has definitely taken on the API train, and even going down further with key also goods providers, corporate housing, your main supply chain partners. And it does help out our corporate clients, but it also helps out Altair with that speed of information and that transfer flow. And so, whether the client's logging onto the portal through automated reporting, they're seeing the information in more real time. It's less data entry on our side. So, the key is the joint partnerships, the investment in the time it takes to implement an API on both sides of the house, and to create those pods of work where you can get dedicated resources, not only on the RMC side, but on the corporate client side, complete the project, and then the post maintenance that requires when you have the API in place, because there does need to be that IT support, I think, going forward. It just doesn't sit and then be okay.
And it drives great efficiencies too. So the API, it just, to your point, Brian, is that speed of information, but it's also reduced keystrokes for the client. So think about an authorization that's just coming through from an HRIS. And then I think the other part of that question is about reporting. I mean, APIs elevate the ability for reporting. So if you are directly connected to an HRIS and you're being able to exchange even demographic information, you can now provide different reporting. It's going to be, in my opinion, more helpful to the business. We always have that 4 pillars of reporting: program costs, volume, exceptions, and quality. But now with exchanging information, you can give a client information about which countries may have the highest attrition rates, or based on your various assignment types, which ones lend to a quicker path to promotion. So that's great information for the business to know, because you think about, that return on mobility, where is it? And that's information that mobility managers can truly socialize internally with their stakeholders and show them, yes, I mean, based on what we're seeing, not only with our RMC partner, but also what we have within our own HRS system. So I think APIs just give a huge, different capabilities for efficiencies, reporting, and then just quick access with our partners as well.
You gentlemen said it so perfectly. I don't have anything to add to what you've said. These are critically important things. I think for the RMC, our job is with each client to gain the right understanding as to what it is they actually want to do with the information. Everybody asks for data analytics, but what is it actually they want? I think Joe's point about providing information that helps make the businesses make the right decisions or gather the right information, that's really important. But every client is going to have different needs, and our job is to identify what their individual needs are and how we can support providing that data to them.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Betsy.
Greg, can I touch on the DEI part as well?
Yeah, please do.
The second part of the question. So it's actually something, I mean, not directly related to COVID, but I think 2020 was a welcome emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has started to permeate through many mobility programs. So I think, I see everybody shaking their head. We're all working, on our own companies. Things as simple as pronoun training internally and pronoun training for our partners, and unconscious bias training for our partners, not just our own employees, because we've actually been doing that for years. But there's a refocus on it internally, but especially with our partners who are actually working with the families on the ground to make sure that that's throughout all of the touch points for the family throughout the relocation. But I think DEI is certainly something near and dear to my heart. I'm one of our executive sponsors on our DEI committee internally, and really working with our clients with tying DEI and mobility together in a lot of different ways, including reporting, I think was what the question was. Is a huge focus, I know, for many companies and many RMCs.
Yeah, so it's well said, Eric. Well said. And I think this inclusion, equity, and we refer to it IE and D. I've seen it all different ways, but the important thing is that you're walking the walk. And I think we talk about, from a corporate client perspective, they touch their client services reps, they touch the team members, interact with their employees. So we wanted to get it down to the team members. So a big push for Altair was employee resource groups, getting those established, getting those employees speaking their minds and showing active participation and making change that they do, and that we create the environment for that voice to be heard. And those are the folks then that touch our clients, that are moving those families, where that pulse point and that, I think, empathy and attitude and embracement is so important. And so that's where we've taken our IE and D, EI and D, DE and I program.
It's critically important.
That's wonderful. So we have 7 minutes left, and we have some more questions coming in from the audience. But I have one question. I think it's just, I'm more curious, and this is put your hats on again. But it's just, and like you, I hate the term new normal, because I think there's always a new normal. I mean, we're constantly changing, life changes, and it's good. We should embrace it. Change is good. But 2020 has been very profound on all of us, professionally and personally, like we've talked about. What is the lasting implications of the pandemic on the relocation industry? So I know that we've discussed duty of care as one, and we've discussed maybe a different mobility mix, and maybe it doesn't have to be one, but just moving forward, where do you think the biggest changes will have been made and the lasting impact on the industry? If you don't want to answer, that's all right too, but I just want to throw that out there.
Big question.
I'll start.
Go, no, Betsy, please go first.
I think hopefully the lasting change will be that we become better prepared and better equipped for change in general and particularly global change. I mean, there have always been some catastrophic events. They are typically within a region or a country, and we've had to deal with them, whether it was 9/11 or, you know, tsunamis or political unrest and military coups. These things have always happened. They certainly affect our profession and the employees and our clients that are all over the world. But I think that the takeaway from this is we are a very small world, and what happened everywhere has affected all of us and continues to. And so my hope is that we embrace change in a new way, and we are better prepared for it when it happens, both personally and professionally. And I'm sure in each of our companies, we are thinking about that. Business continuity has a whole different meaning now.
Brian, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I think the experience of the pandemic has had an impact on all of us, and I hope that mobility gets caught up in the spot of just being more humane. And we've always been a very, compared to other industries, I think the people that are in this have tended to that way, be really interpersonal, high EQ, but there could be an increased fraternity, niceness, partnership that could continue to exist if we place all of this into perspective about what this all means. And I'm sure almost all of us know somebody that lost a loved one, and we're coming out of this now. I don't want to lose that perspective ever now for the rest of my life, and helping lead this organization, working across the aisle with Eric and Joe and our supply chain. I want to take that into each and every day. I hope that is what happens with a lot of people in our industry. So I'll take that approach on the question.
It's definitely elevated that personal side, right? Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something where, you know, and Betsy, you called it, right? There was 9/11, there were the military coups, the tsunamis, but those were pocketed. This has affected the globe, and I feel like it's pulled us all together. And I really, you know, implore the industry not to lose that, because it's so critical. I mean, think about, you know, Eric, I think you mentioned it as well, the safety of our employees, the mobile employees, our clients. I mean, that, you know, that should never change, because, you know, one thing in mobility, we don't create widgets, right? There's not something you can hold. It's an intangible service that we provide, and that has, I believe, elevated in 2020. If you think about everything from, we talked about service scores, but our consultants have not only become, you know, household goods experts, home health experts, you know, compensation experts, they've become psychology experts. Many times they are a lifeline for that family on the other end, asking, what am I going to do? Who's going to help me here? And they get to be the superhero and say, it's me, I'm going to help you. So I think if we can keep that people first mentality and keep that going forward, that shouldn't change, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll just close it out with echoing all those thoughts, and then to tie on a little bit with Brian. I mean, a lot of us, I think maybe all of us, have mentioned best post-relocation scores we've ever had. History of the company was 2020, and I think a big part of that is our employees being empowered and trained well, and, you know, all of those things. But I think there's a little bit more appreciation in the world now about what's really important, and I do hope that carries through. I think, you know, the people we're servicing are more appreciative of the information we're giving them and the care we're giving them. So, you know, I know, as Greg mentioned, you know, things have certainly slowed down, which isn't a bad thing. But I just think people are more appreciative of little things and of being taken care of.
Yep.
Well, thank you, everyone. This is a great ending to a great panel discussion. I personally agree. Yeah, we're all in this together. And I mean, you know, everybody is impacted, and we all have a shared responsibility. And so I'd like to thank Betsy, Eric, Joe, and Brian for a wonderful discussion. We will be sharing this recording and all the details to everyone who registered, so that will be forthcoming. But once again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg, for hosting.